But there are some lessons here from this chapter that I want to leave you before we tie it off about storms. Some lessons about storms. Storms often come when we disobey the will of God. Doesn't mean necessarily that's the reason, but it can be the reason. And an example of that, of course, is Jonah. Jonah didn't accept his calling until God explained it to him a little more clearly. Okay? You want to find out what God is calling you to. Storms also have a way of revealing character. You measure a seaman not by what he does in fair weather, but how he handles the storms. Very interesting lesson in World War II. It was our practice in the late 30s and so forth. When the weather was nice, they had operations. When the weather was bad, they'd cancel those operations. We discovered later the Japanese had just the opposite technique. When the weather was fine, they gave their guys liberty. When there was a storm, they went to sea and practiced and trained. And as we learned more and more in World War II, we discovered that if we could figure out where the storms were, we knew where the Japanese fleet was, because they learned to make the storms their friend and their partner, so to speak, in great contrast to our original practices. No, storms have a way of revealing character. The storms in life will reveal your character. And you can run with that. That's pretty obvious. Even the worst storms cannot hide the face of God or hinder the purpose of God. No matter how severe the storms may appear, they will be serving God's ultimate purpose. And that's also very true of the nation Israel. They're facing a world with no real friends. And but I don't worry about that because he that keepeth Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. I worry about America because up until recently, they also have stood for Israel's right to exist. And I believe it was that posture that sheltered them from an overdue judgment. But for the first time in their history, they've abandoned that policy, and I think that's putting them at jeopardy, not Israel, them. But also, it's interesting how in this narrative that we encountered here, that Paul received a word of assurance that they needed, and God overruled so that his servant arrived safely in Rome. We need to remember, no matter how dark it gets, no matter how troubled it may seem, that God is in control. And that, once you really, really embrace that, boy, that's the ultimate comfort. That's the ultimate comfort. And finally, storms also can give us opportunities to serve others and bear witness to Jesus Christ. It's interesting to reread this narrative and recognize how Paul never missed a chance to use it as an opportunity, whether it was his testimony before those various audiences or whether it was his conduct on that ship. He used everything that came along as an opportunity to declare the glory of God and his trustworthiness. So